Dad Pod.
This is a video thing as well.
Doesn't have a name.
Podcast.
Midlife crisis.
Paddy Daddy.
Midlife crisis.
Dadcast.
That's not bad, actually.
Dadcast with Nivea Men. Try Ireland's #1 skincare brand.
All right, you're very welcome along to episode 3, season 3 of Dadcast. All the dads are here. Dave is here. Dave, how are you? Oh, you're on mute. Nathan's here. Nathan, how are you?
I don't think I'm on mute.
No, not muted. Now you're there. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you.
Adrian Barry is here. Adrian, how are you?
Dave and myself are touchy because we've been sitting there waiting for you, a couple of beautiful people, for the last 20 minutes. So
how do you deal with your children when they don't leave the house on time? Do you take that well?
I roar at them. I throw their scooters over the hedge and I put their lunch in a black bag and throw them. No. Yeah, sometimes a bit of everything, isn't it?
Go on. You decided not to be too giving on this season of Dadcast, but you can do a bit better than that.
I have heard you lads talking about that before. It's not that it can't be at times stressful. Of course it can, but largely you just keep the train moving, and people, largely we have one lodger in the house who's particularly challenges your patience when you're at times trying to get out the door and is kind of refusing to cooperate in any way, shape or form. So that can be challenging. We had a birthday party across the road not that long ago, and we were having evening dinner, and then sort of, vegetables were not been eaten. So I said, well, if the veg isn't eaten, then you ain't going across the road for cake. You and I are going to stay here, and we'll see how all that goes. This particular character was like, fair enough. We'll sit this one out, and we eventually had to come to some sort of compromise so that we didn't have to embarrass ourselves as a family by not turning up. And
in other words, he called your bluff and won.
Pretty much. But I kind of felt, the way you make accommodations for, you got me this time. But I kind of felt as if
the exception that I'm making is not the new rule, but it actually is the new rule.
But the act of having a bit of a Barney about it, I felt was like enough, because you also have to compromise, right? Like you have to sort of you have to be flexible. I think would have been totally unreasonable to have said, if you haven't eaten your veg, then we're not going to have seen that one out. So yeah, we did go at some point, and cake was had.
Cake was had.
Yeah. Okay.
The antithesis of this show is obviously experts or anybody who knows anything about what they're actually doing. But I do remember reading an expert one time saying that whole kind of, if you don't do this, you can't have that thing, doesn't work. And yet we find ourselves doing it all the time, and it never works. It just never works. It just creates resentment.
One thing that I would say, right, that there is current wisdom, right? And the current wisdom changes all the time. Like there are books published, there are experts in the field, all of that sort of stuff. I kind of think, who was it? Was it James Horan years ago who said, James Horan, might have been one of the Kerry managers, could have been Jack O'Connor's first stint, can't remember. One of them had said, there was a bit of chat about sort of the style of football or the backroom team or whatever it was. And they said, listen, if this isn't going to work out, it's not going to work out on my terms. And I kind of feel that would be my approach to it, that it's not that you don't pay attention to some of the wisdom and the expertise that is out there, but ultimately you can't be looking back in 20 years time and saying, well, we effed this up because we read this thing on Instagram or we read this thing in a book. I think you have to be saying we effed this up because of our own decisions, right? Like that'd be my view. It's not to be ignorant or to ignore the wisdom or whatever that's out there, of course, but at the same time, die by your own decisions.
Well, in this specific example, the expert says we're doing it wrong, and you're like, no, I'm happy that I screwed this up on my own.
But he's an expert who doesn't live with my kids.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know if I'm doing it wrong. The only person who can truly make an informed analysis of whether we're doing it right or wrong is me and my wife, not this guy. He doesn't know me, doesn't know my kids, and doesn't know their personalities, and doesn't know our family dynamic. And I disagree wholeheartedly with your premise, Chair, that we're not going to do this if you don't do this approach doesn't work. It works regularly in our house. Almost always. I would say I would have at least a 60% strike rate when it comes to the use of that. And usually it's up for something small enough. Like, you have to use it in a situation where the thing that you're looking to get them to do is pretty achievable. So it's not like if you haven't finished this novella by 5 o'clock, you're not going training. But small things like, right, well, look, at least there's 10 pieces of carrot on that plate. 7 of those need to be eaten in the next 10 minutes, or you'll sit there and you'll watch your brother eat his ice cream. So if you're into watching other people eat ice creams that you won't have, fire away, leave those carrots on the plate. Always works. That kind of thing almost always works.
But what if they don't do it?
Then he gets to sit there and watch his brother eat an ice cream.
But how often does that happen?
Almost never, because he knows that what he's been asked to do is quite a small thing. So I'm going to suck it up and do it, because that ice cream is important to me.
Okay. Well, look, we find that our children are too bloody minded. They're like, no, you've made this thing into this big deal. Now I'm gonna call your bluff, and that's good. But you did say a 60% strike rate, which is a good solid C, Dave. I see that. How would you rate your parenting? Good solid C. We're not bad, not the worst. There are some other clowns who are doing it worse than us.
I think any parent out there, if they were being graded over a 10 to 15 year period, would bite your hand off for a C.
A good solid C grade for this episode, handed out in the first 5 minutes. We're like, yes, a lap of honor. Oh, there we go.
Isn't it
Dadcast is in partnership. Dadcast is in partnership
with
Nivea Men. Would you want to stand it? Go on, Adrian.
You go for it. You do.
Go on.
You. I was going to just say that I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they were asking about, like, your what?
But do you want me to do the commercial read?
Yeah, I'm saying go for it.
I love Nivea.
You're saying go for it, but then you're like, not stopping talking. It's like, yeah, okay.
Right, I did say go for it, then you stopped. Now I'm going to put myself on mute here, and you go and do your thing.
Dadcast is in partnership with Nivea Men. Want to feel great in your skin? Nivea Men has you covered, from sensitive, tailored skincare to cleansing and anti-age. Try Ireland's #1 men's skincare brand. Go on, Adrian.
I was just going to say that I was talking to somebody about something the other day, and they were like, what type of a parent are you? Do you do this bit this way, or is it like this thing over here? And my point was that it's everything every day. What's the thing that won the Oscars? What's the
Everywhere all at once.
That is our house every day. Like, sometimes we're a C, sometimes we're an A, loads of times we're an F. It's like a little bit of everything all the time.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? We have had a big response to showing up, which I think is the main life lesson that we've done. Maybe this is actually episode 4. I can't remember. Is it episode 3?
4.
But anyway, these
4.
Right.
4.
Episode 4. The first 3 episodes, 2 of them double dropped after a little bit of technical wizardry in the background, and so there was a surge in interest. We made it to #1 in the podcast charts for the parenting subsection in Apple. But a lot of people are parents, and so therefore you would expect that there are a lot of people listening to parenting podcasts.
Well, that's the moral of the
Amy
podcast chart story.
Huberman was second, and I'm fairly sure Amy has like 1 million listens a month, so we must be doing pretty well.
Well, the moral of the podcast chart story is keep slicing and splicing and re-subsectioning those subsections until you end up with a sample size of which you can definitely be on top. Just keep doing it. Keep just drilling down there, lads.
I mean, okay. Or the fact I'm taking the show up. That's the most important thing. Do the things that your kids want to do. Be there for them. Don't be flaky.
Even if you're half-hearted, half interested, half sitting in the car, as long as we're here, that's all that matters.
On your phone. Right. This one comes from Dave and Amy in Nace. Hey there, lads. Delighted to have you back, and not a moment too soon. I wrote to you back in August 2020 when my wife was a few weeks pregnant with her first, telling you that I'm lazy and asking if parents have a reservoir of energy they can dip into to keep them going. I can't quite remember what you said, neither can we. But the short answer is that yes, they do. But you do have to keep it replenished with naps any opportunity you get. My wife still laughs sometimes and reminds me of that email and how needlessly I worried. I'm writing to you now at 1 a.m. after having been awoken by our now 2-year-old Luke, who I have resettled and who I'm sleeping in the room with because his sleep is a bit erratic this week. Can't complain too much though. He's mostly a good sleeper these days and he's a good boy. But you can take it that we're navigating our way through all the many and varied challenges that parenting presents us with. We understand the code for sometimes we don't really like our own children, but most of the time, all of the time, we love them. That doesn't mean that those little periods where we dislike them are longer than they should be. But anyway, sorry, that was me as an aside. One more. So challenge due in November. Yes, we're pregnant now at number 2 and quite excited, but a little daunted. So I'm back again looking for advice from you. What do I need to know about juggling a demanding 2 to 3-year-old and a newborn? How do we maintain our sanity and composure? How do we ensure the toddler doesn't become a demon in response to the new arrival? Many thanks, Dave and Amy and Nace. Well, first off, congratulations. That's great news. I am completely, I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm fairly sure that the problem with the second child is that it's actually so easy that you lull yourself into thinking, this is grand, we'll have a third. And that's the bit where you make your chronic mistake. You've been through the worst of it with the first one. The second one is grand because you kind of know what you're doing and there's 2 of you and it's like man marking job. Number 3 is the second bomb that goes off after the first bomb.
Well, let's not have him worrying about number 3 when they're only pregnant with number 2. That's another fight for him.
But he's just in fairness, it's a good warning because, you know, if he's ill prepared, number 3 may just happen.
Anything else you want to tell us about that bottle of wine that time?
Here's a man speaking from the well of experience.
Just saying. May not happen for you, Dave. May not happen for you.
Well, it won't happen to me. Certain steps have been taken to ensure that will not happen to me. But I don't want to rain on this guy's parade because I was very much in that section of parents who had been told when we were telling people that we were expecting our first child that it was not fun and that it was a daunting experience and you'd lose your independence and life would never be the same and your life would not be your own, and all of the naysayers were just so wrong. They were completely wrong. Nothing they had predicted that would come to pass in our life anyway did come to pass. It was just the most unbelievably fun roller coaster ride. I was given the gift of time. I was able to watch all the highlight shows I could always struggle to watch because there was 2 of us against 1, and the mother was on maternity leave. Each person got to lie on every second day. It was amazing. Having the second child is like jumping off the edge of a cliff where there's sharp rocks at the bottom and you do not have a parachute. You're back in your routine, given that his son is between 2 and 3, he said his first child was. So you're back in your routine. You're hopefully that child is sleeping. Our first was a really good sleeper. They're starting to eat properly. The nappies are a bit more manageable. And they're starting to speak to you. They're just getting to that stage in life where they can maybe begin to articulate what's on their mind. And then the rug gets pulled out from underneath everybody. And it is a literal and figurative shit show for at least the first 6 months. And that's before you touch on the feelings of the first child and how out of touch and out of place they suddenly feel. So best of luck with that. I hope you enjoy it. One huge tip I would give, and now obviously in the current climate of issues with childcare and cost of childcare and lack of childcare places, one of our big regrets was that we didn't put our first child into childcare for at least maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, because when I was away with work an awful lot, as you guys know, around that time, and it was incredibly tough on my wife at the time. So when we look back, we would have been thinking even with just 3 or 4 hours a day, if the 2-year-old had been in a creche or with a minder, it would have made a massive difference. I don't know if that's possible or plausible in this specific case, but that would be one piece of advice I might bestow upon him.
The ECC is obviously 2 years now as well. So I think once you turn 3, is it the January of the year you turn 3 or after you turn 3?
Yeah. So he was just a bit too young for that at the time.
But in this instance, that might actually make a lot of sense that you
could do, yeah.
Yeah. That definitely, we were in the Nathan camp where the situation of having the second one was now we'd actually had a miscarriage in between, so I think we were just pretty happy about the fact that it happened. And our eldest was a bit older because of that, so there was obviously more of a gap than there turned out to be between 2 and 3, which is basically Irish twins. So yeah, beware of the Irish twins. I would say this is a big enough workload on its own, and I would have said that the difference between 1 and 2 is that there's just another one, whereas the difference between 2 and 3 is that brownie in motion that goes everywhere.
I wouldn't want people to believe that I'm saying we weren't happy, or obviously we were a bit delighted. I was so happy that boy number 1 had a little brother. That was incredible. And the new guy, straight away, you could tell he was a character, and it was going to be a lot of fun. But it's more that you're back in your routine. You've got your life back in terms of proper sleep, and everything seems to be far more manageable on a day-to-day basis. That just gets thrown completely out the window again.
Yeah. All the medical stuff that comes with having babies, you forget about it. The oxytocin kicks in, and it has a placebo effect on the man. I'm like, it was fine. Was this? Is that all right? Right.
There's great stuff obviously after, when you get past that. Like Dave talks about the shittiness of that first 6 months, maybe even a year. There's great stuff after that. Like, I mean, it's basically like, the theory about having 2 dogs where they will, on the best of days, they'll occupy each other and they'll look after each other and they'll hang out together, and that will give you time to catch up on the highlight shows and whatever else you're doing.
And beat the lard out of each other.
They will beat the lard out of each other also.
Prepare to spend much of your life, certainly from the ages of 3 upwards, being a referee. And one of those boxing ring referees where you're constantly having to step in, and possibly you might get caught in the crossfire when you're at it.
I filmed a bit of that, and I'm really glad I did, because it's great to look back on. And they laugh now, where our middle child would be like sitting on our youngest, and when she sees it now, she can't stop laughing at it. I remember filming it at the time and sending it around, and my family being appalled. Why aren't you stopping? This is horrific. I was like, well, because at some point this is going to be funny, and I found it funny pretty much from the start. So maybe it's just maybe that's an F as opposed to a C level parenting. But I now look back and go, that was actually top quality. You need to record the good stuff as opposed to just here's our posed Instagram picture.
Well, myself and Adrian were chatting to somebody last night who has a relatively newborn baby, and that we were literally recommending that to take as much video as you possibly can at all stages. Because I find now when it comes up in my Google memories, the lads absolutely love it. Looking back at when they were 2 and 3 and they're bin lunatics and all of that, because it feels like a lifetime ago. And there's loads of bits then in between where you're going, why didn't I take a video here for 3 months? All I have is photographs, which don't really tell me anything about anything.
We have that regret. We didn't take enough video, and it is a regret of ours that we can't just dip in and some of the videos as well from when the youngest guy was very young in his first year, like him crawling for the first time, walking for the first time. That's disappeared. I don't know where it's gone. It's not in the cloud. It's not in Google videos, Google photos, anywhere. So that is, I would say take as much video as you possibly can. The other great thing, one of the major positives about having that second child, he will learn very quickly how much they have learned on the basics. Like himself and his wife will turn to each other at some stage and go, do you remember how badly we screwed this up the first time? Whether that's sleep patterns, whether it's nappy changes, whether it's, the steps that you would take to ensure that, the walls of the carpet aren't destroyed, or at potty training, all that kind of stuff. You do.
The unnecessary expense.
Yes, you're an expert in some regards where you just obviously weren't before, because just nobody had a clue what was going on.
You don't know what you're doing. Right, let's move on. Snip, snip, hooray. Pete says, hey lads, fucking delighted to have you all back. You've sold me on the snip. Good man, Pete. Maybe we get a job lot organized for a bunch of Dadcast listeners where it's 400 instead of 500 quid. And you can all go in together, get your lads out, bzz, 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 and away you go.
We'll have beers afterwards.
On the subject,
I saw sorry, I'm going off topic again, as you're just about to get started there, Ger. Something in the UK where they do for fathers of girls, which is plats and beers. There's basically a company that runs these nights in pubs where they show you how to put plats in your daughter's hair while you're having a beer.
Genius.
It's a great idea.
It feels like the plats are not the important bit of that.
Well, long term, because I'm always the difference when I'm doing my daughter's hair when she's going to school and when my wife is doing, where it's some work of art. Whereas when I was pulled together, let's stand there for 2 seconds, and I somehow managed to do an even ponytail, and I'm delighted with myself.
Also, Nathan,
Yeah,
it
could be wondrous.
You know the kind of world we're living in now, Nathan. I mean, there may be some sons out there that want their hair plaited also. Let's tick that box.
Well, they can. I feel like you really want to go off on something there, Dave.
No. Again, given the current climate, that is as far as I'm willing to go.
Okay. On the subject of places to go, the New Park Hotel in Kilkenny is unreal. They've loads of huge dinosaurs, go-karts, zip lines, kids club, nature trails. Top place, highly recommended. Thank me later, Pete. So there you go. We were asking for recommendations after. Was somebody going to Amber Springs last week, or?
I'm going in a couple of weeks.
Right. I think the New Park and Amber Springs are somehow related. I'm not sure. Certainly, the New Park is part of a wider group.
Yeah, have you been to the New Park?
No, you were raving about it.
I haven't. Sorry, I haven't been there, but I have been in Kilkenny when our relations were down. We've gone to visit them, I think twice, and both like they have this. Out the back is like Amber Springs, but Amber Springs might sue me. I'm going to say it's bigger, better, more impressive. I don't know, but it's it definitely works for kids.
Okay, so that one, go get the snip. That's what we recommend. And then this last one, piece of correspondence for this week's Dadcast @Off the Ball, by the way. Dadcast @offtheball.com for email. Or you can get us at Dadcast Pod on Twitter. So lads, first of all, great work to have you back. Who do I thank? It's great to hear you all, says Brian. So where do you all stand on baby monitors? For me, I would have got shot of them at between 6 and 12 months max. I would subscribe to the Russian orphanage principle of let them give out, but after a few weeks of that, they will not become over-dependent on you at bedtime at least. Don't get me wrong. If I heard a cry from the room, I'd be in more or less within reason. But in the summer, my kids will turn 6 and 7. Irish twins. Oh, Jesus, that's a different pod. Yes, it is. We'll do that one too. But my wife still has the baby monitors on and cannot be convinced otherwise, predominantly saying she can't hear them if they do cry out or whatever. But again, lots of buts here. Sure, of course, they call out because they know they can get a response. I've had the conversation with her about being concerned what I'll hear when they bring home their first partners. To no avail. She's just not ready to get rid of. Only love to hear your views on what you did on this. I have a few more things waiting in the wing, but in all honesty, this is the big one right now. So thanks, Brian, for getting in touch. Dadcast @offtheball.com. Baby monitors, when did you get rid of them?
First thing that jumps to mind for me there is, do you remember that Little Britain sketch where there were, do you remember, Bitty, and the guy was like 37? That's, I do think, I think they've overshot the runway with the monitors. I think our man there is
judgment-free environment here, Adrian.
Advice, not judgment. Advice. I think I find it hard to disagree with him. I must say, I'd be interested in getting his wife's point of view. So if he wants to, or she wants to get in touch and let us know. But on the face of it, from the information that's available, I think that turn the monitors off, because he's right. Like, ultimately, if they know, they're going to call out, and there's somebody in the room within 2 seconds. You know yourself, like, kids are obviously, even at that age, they're obviously dreaming, they're disturbed. You can't be in and out to them every 2 seconds. Most of the hours do that, and you just don't pay them any attention, and they go back to sleep again. Like we have, so ours is 14 months, 15 months. And so he sort of has a monitor some nights, and other nights he doesn't. Obviously, we're sort of in the process of unwittingly fading that out of his life. And he, even the times,
because you forget to turn it on.
Oh, we forget to turn it on, or I fell asleep on the couch, didn't wake up until 5:30 in the morning. So that sort of stuff. And he's grand. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's fine. And like, sometimes it means that he'll cry for 10 or 15 minutes, but we're, again, unwittingly conditioning him to know that every time he calls out, we're not coming rushing into him. So look, I don't know. I take your point. You don't want to be judgy about these things. And so I'm trying to give my experience / advice.
Judge away. What the hell are you doing, lad?
What the hell are you doing? Put them in the bin.
just like accidentally pour a pint on them. Oh, the water spilled on them and they're broken. They're not waterproof.
There might be a couple of circumstantial aspects to this one, in that perhaps they live in a huge house, a mansion, and the kids are sleeping in the east wing and him and his wife are sleeping in the west wing. And the only way they could possibly hear each other is if by the use of monitors. Now, I would say that's probably unlikely, but let's bear that in mind. Secondly, maybe he and his wife are unbelievably deep sleepers. And if even one of their kids screaming in the middle of the night might not wake them. So there might be a little fear of that as well. But
Oh, that'd be great.
yeah, if only. If neither of those apply in this situation, I do think they're past the need of there being monitors. Now, in like, to give you the example of us, my wife is a very deep sleeper. I'd be a very light sleeper. And often, certainly 4 days a week, the younger guy always sleeps through the night, no matter what. The older guy who's 8, 4 nights a week, he might make up once in the middle of the night and tell us that he can't sleep or that he had a bad dream. But he lies in his bed and he just calls out. He just calls, Daddy. And I'll always be the one to hear it. She will wake up the following morning. I've been completely unaware that there was any activity during the night, but I'll go in and obviously tuck him in, tell him to count sheep or whatever it is. But there's absolutely no need for a monitor. And our monitors were gone very early. I'd say at the absolute most, the younger guy was 2, but I'd say probably a lot earlier than that. So would be very interesting, Zaders. I'd get the perspective of his wife in this situation, because I'm not sure what possible need there is for it. It's more of an attachment to it at this stage, that maybe it's for their good or her good rather than the good of the children, and that it might just take, if we're to use the word weaning yourself off it, it's weaning the parents off this than the children.
Yeah, I'd say we were the same time-wise. You can edit this out if it goes against all safety protocols. One thing I would advise any new parent not to do is get one of those things those monitors that has an alarm on it where they lie in the bed, and if they don't move for long enough, it goes off. That's just bringing undue stress onto yourself.
Did you get one of those?
We had one. It came with the monitor, and yeah, I'm pretty sure the alarm went off at one stage. Right, I was like,
was that just for the cot? Was that just for the cot, or when they were in their own bed?
It's just for the cot.
You see, there's a mental issue around that, in that once as a couple you broach the idea of that monitor, you kind of have to see it through. Like, once that conversation has been had,
because the guilt.
Because if like, you know, God forbid there's a cot death or something, and you had discussed getting that monitor and then you didn't follow it through, I mean, that's just like the most god-awful situation that a parent could possibly be in. So I think beware of even having those thoughts or having that conversation, because you may feel that you've mentally railroaded yourself into having to go out and get that. But if you're a new parent in particular, anything that allows you to sleep a little more easily at night, I think I would have certainly no problem with that. But
yeah, that's not what we're talking about. We're definitely talking about this has gone on too long. And if one of you think it's gone on too long, then you need to use whatever powers of persuasion and influence you have to like how can you be having crack yourselves? That like they're going to be staying up later and later and later. And the amount of like you time that you have every evening is diminishing rapidly. And so you should be protecting that jealously for now, because it's going.
And also the monitor is a two-way system, isn't it? Once you press the button. So if their kids are 6 and 7, surely they are talking to them while they're down watching a movie on a Saturday night. Surely the older guy in particular is kind of leaning across to the bedside locker and saying, I can't sleep. Are you going to come up here? So I'd be surprised. Yeah, exactly. I'd be surprised if that wasn't, because by the end of our monitor days, when the younger guy was 18 months, but the older lad was pushing 4, he was hitting that button. He was talking to us. I mean, that was another reason to get rid of the thing.
Right. That was this week's correspondence. Anybody else want to talk about anything before we? All right. Tumbleweeds. That's exactly what you want in a program like this.
I brought the 8-year-old to the Latvia game last night.
Oh.
And it's incredible, the innocence, the naivety of the young budding developing football fan. The excitement with which they galloped into the Aviva Stadium in the rain to watch the 133rd ranked nation in the world. And I was thinking, we'll soon beat that out of them. But like the dads that went,
you're like,
well, look, obviously in hindsight, as friendlies go, we got 5 goals and an Ireland win and a debut goal or a first goal for Evan Ferguson, which is great. But the dads were consoling themselves with the fact that there were pre-match pints had, and that there are also there's also the visit to the Aviva on Monday to watch Mbappe and Griezmann and those boys as a kind of an atonement for the sufferings of last night. But it was interesting to see how quickly the kids lost interest. But then they always seem to time it perfectly, where they retake their seats for a goal. Because there was 5 or 6 of them, so they were having the crack. They were running up and down the steps, and they were making up all sorts, chasing games and everything. The stewards, in fairness, as long as they weren't getting too rowdy, the stewards were happy enough to let it go. So that was nice of them. But that's the first time I've brought them to a game that wasn't of real importance, and they did seem to enjoy it. So anyone out there who is considering bringing their kids to the Aviva, over 40,000 for a friendly, unbelievable, on a wet night. But overall, it was a good experience.
Yeah, very good. Grassroots obviously also available for next to nothing.
The first time I've seen it, Nathan, you might have been to the Aviva for soccer matches more recently than me, but constant promotion of League of Ireland games on the revolving electronic billboards around in between the tiers and the stands, which I hadn't seen before, which I thought was an interesting development and a good one too.
Yeah, they're definitely getting a bit better, I think, at promoting it. It's interesting as well. I found with my lads that they haven't had great interest in Ireland. Like, they've been to a good few of the matches, but it's Premier League superstars. But like, the last week has been Evan Ferguson. Suddenly they have a hero again. Like, the excitement this morning. Did you see he scored? He scored. He scored. He just can't stop scoring. Like, wow.
What I have found interesting,
Nathan,
Nathan,
haven't had anybody.
My 8-year-old, he's learned fast that there's absolutely no chance ever that Ireland will win a World Cup. So he's watching Lionel Messi lift the World Cup, and he's thinking, God, look at all those guys. He's looking at Javi Martinez, who has a World Cup winner's medal around his neck, going, God, that would be the most amazing thing. And I want to be a professional footballer. But do I have to play for Ireland? Is there any chance that Ireland will win a World Cup by the time I'm growing up? I said, look, there's literally zero chance. Like, it just will never, ever happen. There's a good chance we may never qualify for a World Cup again. So let's just take it in small doses, and we'll hopefully get to hopefully qualify some year. So then immediately he starts.
And kids were also not going to send you to a private school, so there's also no chance you'll win in a Rugby World Cup either.
He's going to be on the late show. He's going
to wanted to explore other options. He wants to explore other options. He's asking me. He asked, "Where are my grandparents from?" Because he knows about the granny rule. He says, "Is there any chance I could do what Jorginho did and play for Italy?" And I said, well, you probably need... Jorginho doesn't have Italian ancestry, I don't think. It's because he was living in Italy for so many years that he was able to play for the Italians. So he's thinking, what country can he go and live in for long enough whereby I know if you're spending enough time in the academy system of a club in a country that you can then play for the national team. The Cavan thing has already been blown out of the water, Nathan, because I think you have to be... I don't think it's your grandparents who have come from the county. I think it has to be a parent.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd say that'll be changed by the time they're ready for senior inter-county.
Yeah. Well, maybe, because he already knows there might be more chance of playing inter-county football for Cavan than there might be for Dublin. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how quickly these lads wise up to the possibilities of success at international level when they're older.
Crushing analysis from his manager there of the under-8s. I don't think you're going to make it, son. You're going to start looking at tier 3 teams.
Under-9s. I don't think he's got a Latvian grandmother, so he's struggling there already.
I sent you the video yesterday, the new ad for the campaign that's launching around consent. It's a new campaign called We Consent, and the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre and the Department of Justice have funded research, and the research is basically saying that everybody thinks consent is important, and that conversations about consent would lead to better outcomes and more equality. And I know we've briefly touched on this before on the podcast, but when are you talking to your children about consent?
What age did the video recommend that you do that?
Well, the video doesn't recommend anything. The video is like showing that actually sex should be pleasurable and consent can be a positive thing, and actually we need to have a conversation that isn't, everybody, there's like a gender stereotype that women are gatekeepers, men are chasers, and that actually, that comes from a position of shame that we all inherited for whatever reason. We can get into that some other time if we want to.
Isn't it I'm obviously the least qualified to talk about this, given that my kids are younger than yours, but it feels to me already like it's a kind of a gradual conversation. Like there probably is a point where you have to sit down and have the literal conversation about what consent is and what it means, but certainly for our crowd at the minute, with the older two, 6 and 4, they're going around talking about like private parts, and they've all sorts of names for it, and it's like it's the funniest thing in the world to them, obviously, at the minute. And so it opens the door to loads of conversations around that stuff about what's appropriate. Obviously, you just need to, at 4 years old, obviously, there's no amazing deep conversation to have, but I do think you can start to introduce broad themes of bringing awareness to them about what is appropriate and what's not. And like, yeah, so I don't know. It feels to me at this stage, and I could be totally wrong, that it's kind of a gradual thing.
Charlotte Regan has a parenting podcast who we'll have on the show, was saying that it's loads of little bite-sized conversations, and he made a great analogy of like the easiest way to talk about it with your kids is like if you're playing a game with somebody and they don't enjoy it, then it's not enjoyable for anybody. It's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's just basically having a conversation with them on their own terms about stuff they understand, where you get the when somebody says no, you stop language and way of thinking about things. And also everybody needs to be enthusiastic about something. Otherwise, it's no fun for anyone. Which I think is really the positivity message that they're trying to promote around this specific element in this conversation. So it'll be interesting to see if it crosses over. I hope it does cross over into the mainstream, where people start talking about the pleasure of sex as opposed to all the myriad dangers and like, oh, it's really for pregnancy and disease, because that's basically how we got taught about it.
God, I'm just thinking of the amount of times over the years that I've heard one of my boys begging the other boy to stop and saying no several times before the other kid stopped whatever it was, when he was thumping the head off him or messing with his blankie or stealing his toys or flicking the TV channels. So it's a good reminder. I can now use that as the first opportunity to put in place the tiniest and first building block towards the future discussions around consent. Excellent.
And that's it, really. Like, it actually isn't that. I know before there's been massive issues that people have gone like, where does consent start and when is it revoked? And like, obviously, you can get into the nuances of those conversations, but ultimately, I always felt like it's fairly common sense that there is when you boil it down, is like, is the consent obvious or not? And if it's not, then just ask. And like, you know, sometimes that's going to cause a situation to stop, but it's far better than the alternative. I think the other thing is that like, it's not a male issue, it's not a female issue, it's an all society issue. But men can't stand back and let the women run the campaign to have the conversation around consent. It's very easy for us to sit back and go, you know, let the women take the lead on this and tell us what we should be doing, and then agree, and then off we go about our business. And it hasn't landed. So it was really just trying to get that conversation going in WhatsApp groups, calling out behavior in conversations with people who you know, and in conversations in your own relationships too.
It'd be great to get some interaction from people who have gone through this over the last couple of years. We're probably heading right into it at the moment. I think sort of fifth class is when the school side of it kicks in a bit more. So there will be a lot of conversations had over the next couple of years as to ways you were able to connect with your kids.
Yeah. I know Adrian has to go, so maybe we'll put a pin in it for this week, but we can definitely come back to it next week. If anybody has any thoughts on that, dadcast@offtheball.com. Dave?
Yeah, good stuff. No, I'm just, thanks for bringing that up towards the end. It's definitely something we'll come back to. Thanks to all our correspondents as well this week. Great stuff.
More of that, yeah.
Yeah. Dadcast is in partnership with Nivea Men. Want to feel great in your skin? Nivea Men has you covered. From sensitive, tailored skincare to cleansing and anti-age. Try Ireland's #1 men's skincare brand. We will see you next week, folks. Cheers.